Our story begins in the midst of World War II. By late 1943, with Germany having endured her first major surrender at Stalingrad that February, it was realized that more extreme methods may be needed in order to finally win the war for the Reich. As a result, Kurt Diebner, president of the German Uranverein, a nuclear science organization, was ordered to form a new research project intended to produce atomic weaponry. He snapped up the best and brightest in particle physics, and one in particular, a Dr. Ulrich Vogel, was chosen to lead this new research initiative named Project Endstation. Sent to a wooded remote facility in Morysko, Germany-occupied Poland, Vogel and the other scientists working under his command were given access to an experimental cyclotron, a particle accelerator, with the intention of using this device to produce this new nuclear technology. By March 1944, 11 tests had ran and all of them had yielded little. However, the 12th test would change the trajectory of mankind forever. As the process ran through, the machinery surged and became unresponsive, with Dr. Kurtz being unable to shut the machine down.
This is Ulrich Vogel, Director of Project Endstation. 7th of March, 1944, 10:03 p.m. Commencing cyclotron test run number 12.
Looks like we are getting the collisions we expected and, some interesting patterns are starting to...
What was that?
I do not know. Gauges are redlining. We have to shut down.
My God! What is happening to the air around the collider?
You men! Back away from that!
Cut! Cut the power!
I'm trying! Controls are not responding!
The two doctors were forced to watch the ensuing chaos within the cyclotron chamber. A strange anomaly manifested within the room, and all the men within were suddenly necrotized by the radiation from the rift, becoming undead. After the room was cleared and the undead specimens were contained, Vogel realized that somehow they had managed to breach the veil between this dimension and another. At this moment, artifacts plundered from sites across the world by SS Division Die Wahrheit began to activate, reconnecting with the Dark Ether, and we will return to this at the end of this video, as this is the premise for Vanguard Zombies' storyline that is set before the events of Cold War Zombies in and around World War II. After taking basic measurements inside the other dimension and realizing that time passed at a different rate, Vogel immediately informs the Uranverein, who responded not with disappointment at the failure of the nuclear project, but with great interest in this new discovery. As the war progressed and Germany's fate looked more and more dire, even Hitler himself expressed a desire to harness this new dimension, specifically with Operation Boulderer. With it appearing almost certain that Germany would lose the war after the loss of Normandy, a band of top SS soldiers under the command of SS Gruppenführer Muller were assembled and sent to Project Endstation to be sent into the Dark Ether, where they would lie in wait to be unleashed on the world at some point in the future and re-establish the Reich. This operation was christened Operation Boulderer by Reich High Command, referencing the Norse god who rose from the dead, and was approved on December 14th, 1944. Vogel was tasked to weaponize all their findings and continue to work on his idea of an army of soldiers who could rise up after being killed. A wonder weapon was also created from an Exo-Element 1 collector called the Decompressive Isotopic Estrangement Machine, or DIE for short. Exo-Element 1, also known as Ethereum, is the element from the Dark Ether that's properties are extremely valuable for technological use as well as weaponry, but it's also equally dangerous, infecting and harming those with too much exposure, as well as terraforming areas where there are large Ethereum deposits. It is what those that inhabit the Dark Ether breathe, and they do not have to breathe in oxygen, allowing inhabitants to theoretically survive anywhere within the Dark Ether, where oxygen would normally be required in the regular world, like space. As Task Force Boulderer arrived on site, all of the scientists at Endstation fled the site, except for Ulrich Vogel, who voluntarily stayed behind to take vital readings after the team passed through, as having the cyclotron produce a stable gateway would involve overloading the power couplings and prevent the cyclotron from being able to be disabled. Though he accepted his duty, Vogel couldn't, in good consciousness, leave his daughter an orphan, and so he asked Kurtz to become Angelica, Hannibal's guardian.
This is Ulrich Vogel, Director of Project Endstation.
Dr. Vogel, Sorry. I did not know you were recording.
Why are you here, Dr. Kurtz? Did you not read my final orders?
Ja, Herr Doktor. That is what I wish to speak about. This last part. About your daughter.
I know it is asking a lot, Kurtz. And I know you and I have not always seen eye to eye. But I trust no one more than you to look after Angelica when I am gone.
I am honored, sir. But this may not be necessary. I beg you, do not evacuate the facility before launching the operation. With the staff here, there's a chance we can stabilize the collider and safely...
Kurtz, stop. You showed me yourself how Operation Balder will surely overload the power couplings. But calling it off would doom the Reich. This, my friend, is the only path forward. Take her. Teach her. Be there, both of you. When Operation Balder bears fruit, finish my work. Tell Angelica her father loved her.
Within the next 2 weeks, on February 3rd, 1945, the Soviets arrived in Moscow and found N Station. After entering the facility and being overrun, NKVD Colonel Pavel Lazarev was sent to the site in order to figure out exactly what happened. Understanding that the machine had somehow produced the undead, he found a young tank mechanic, Sergeant Kazimir Zykov, and volunteered him to be sealed into the facility and shut the machine down. Interestingly, there was no sign of Vogel. After trying everything, Zykov, desperate and thinking of his family, realized he would have to sacrifice himself to prevent the power from ever being used by the outside world, the East and the West, as it would lead to the world's inevitable destruction. He flung himself into the anomaly and closed it from the inside, succeeding in his mission, but trapping himself in a strange and unforgiving world, the place below creation known as the Dark Ether. Film reels were recorded about Project N Station and were sent to the Soviet archives and remained hidden for almost 40 years. On February 21st, Kurtz and Angelica were captured by the Red Army when Lazarev found Kurtz and the young Angelica hiding with him, believing she is Kurtz's daughter. Shortly after this, Lazarev blackmailed Kurtz by threatening to kill Angelica, forcing him to give up the locations of the other N Station scientists. Kurtz agreed but were forced to move to Russia under new names and work for Lazarev. Kurtz is given the name Ivan Valentin, and Angelica is given Alexandra Valentina. In Russian, female surnames often add an A to the end.
This is Colonel Pavel Lazarev interrogating prisoner Lucas Kurtz. Why did you and so many others desert the facility?
We were ordered to evacuate. We did our duty to the fatherland. That is all you will get out of me.
I will have that little girl we found hiding with you shot.
No! Wait. I will tell you where the rest of the N Station staff are hiding.
You come back to Mother Russia and continue your work. For me. She will receive a proper Bolshevik education and become a productive member of society.
At around the age of 5, Valentina heard a voice talking to her, claiming to be her father. At first, she doubted this, but then he referred to her by her true name, convincing her that he really was Ulrich Vogel. Whilst Kurtz tried to raise her as a supportive father, he prevented her from an interest in the sciences in order to protect her from following the same path as her real father. All the while, the voice she heard in her head taught her science, allowing her to rapidly become a prodigy, and at the age of 16 be accepted into Moscow's Institute of Physics and Technology. When Kurtz found this letter, he forbade Valentina from entering. However, in response, she poisoned her father's oldest friend, likely under the influence of the voice of Vogel.
Alexandra, is it time for tea already?
Yes, uncle. Be careful. It is quite hot.
Tea can never be too hot. Alexandra, can I have a moment, please? About our discussion yesterday, I only wish to protect you from the mistakes we made.
I understand, Uncle Lucas. But I do not agree. My father was a brilliant man, and you were a pathetic worm working in his shadow. How dare you denounce his work? How dare you sit there and feed me lies?
Careful, Alexandra. Your father...
I will go to university, Uncle. You will not stop me. Father is disappointed you lost your way. You abandoned Operation Boulder.
The team... What have... done... Alexandra!
She would go on to graduate top of her class in 1960. A decade later, in 1970, she would be recruited into the KGB and at some point later was transferred to Spetsgruppe Omega. Omega Group was formed on August 30th, 1975 by KGB chairman Yuri Andropov to identify, study, and weaponize psychotronic phenomena ranging from biocommunications and bioenergetics. Members of the organization were comprised of specialists from Spetsgruppe Alpha and were tasked with conducting special military-based operations, though a select amount of key personnel derived from previous experiences in other experimental research programs were tasked with investigating possible weapon applications from any exoscientific phenomena discovered. Omega Group never managed to find a scientific explanation for psychotronic abilities, but still conscripted a handful of Russian citizens with genuine talents and turned them into intelligence assets. Their gifts, however, were impossible to reproduce, and all of the assets were either killed in action or suffered psychological breakdowns. In nearby West Germany, Samantha Maxis, raised in an orphanage, was accepted into Heidelberg University, where she obtained a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics with a minor in linguistics. A year later, she was recruited into the BND, the West German Intelligence Service. On October 18th, 1978, the CIA formed a joint task force with MI6 in order to find and kill Mason, Hudson, and Weaver in what they dubbed Operation Charybdis, as they deemed them a threat to national security. The kill order, however, was eventually discontinued and the trio were spared. They continued their work with the CIA. By 1979, Samantha Maxis was placed on assignment in Iran and was caught up in the revolution, as the Shah was overthrown. As the CIA and Western intelligence agencies worked together to ensure the Shah's safe extraction to the United States, many diplomats and Western civilians were being left behind. Going directly against the orders of his superiors, CIA operative Gregory Weaver ordered for her to be extracted out of the country, off the books, marking the beginnings of a strong bond forming between the two spies. Whilst he still maintains and often wears an eye patch to cover his wound after his eye was gouged out by Colonel Lev Kravchenko. At a later point, Sam would give Weaver intel on a special target of particular interest. After believing he had killed the target, Weaver lit the house on fire to cover his tracks, only at that point realizing the target's son, Samuel, and his wife were also inside. Samantha was waiting for a phone call from Weaver from 10 to 12 o'clock, until she heard about an explosion on TV, distressing her to the point of sleeplessness. At 3 AM, Weaver arrived at Samantha's apartment, bloodied and wounded, and wept at what he had done. While crying, Weaver mumbled about covering his tracks after a hit and how sorry he was. He told Samantha that the boy was supposed to be staying with his mother, but in reality was inside the house as it burned to the ground, only to later find out that both the mother and son were inside. Weaver and Samantha Maxis would forever be traumatized with guilt. Samantha would later state that she believes that these events would later come back to haunt them. Omega Group was also involved in the assassination attempts of US President Ronald Reagan in March 1981 and Pope John Paul II in May 1981, as well as the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat in October 1981. However, as a result of little funding from Andropov, none of Omega Group's initial projects were able to advance past their research phase. Due to this, the CIA would write off Omega Group in 1981, believing that their projects were abandoned. Consequently, all of the assets involved with Omega Group's psychotronic operations were ultimately liquidated following the death of General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev in November 1982. On March 23, 1983, Ronald Reagan announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, which, if implemented, could have posed a mortal threat to the Soviet Union. 2 days later, the new KGB chairman, Viktor Chebrikov, appointed Colonel Lev Kravchenko as head of the failing Omega Group in an attempt to quickly and quietly end his career after the embarrassment at the Lubyanka building. Kravchenko followed suit, unaware of their nefarious agenda, under the pretense to revitalize and restore Omega Group to full readiness in order to offset the threat posed by the SDI. The very next day, Kravchenko ordered the unit's research and development team to scour NKVD and KGB archives, tasking them to find something useful enough to give Omega Group a new purpose to work for, or else he would terminate the organization and reassign its members. He appointed Gorev, his protege, and the son he never had, as his right-hand man, and placed the impressively intelligent Alexandra Valentina as the head of psychotronics. Shortly after this, on July 15th, she presented him with two 1945 end-station tapes, which she had retrieved from the KGB archives after 4 months of digging. In reality, Valentina was aware of the films for nearly a decade, but chose not to reveal them until the time was right. Seeing the tape, Kravchenko ordered Operacja Roboyshtik, also known as Operation Undertaker in English, and Dr. Valentina is sent to Project Endstation alongside Dr. William Peck, a former Department of Defense researcher with an IQ of 179, who was identified as a CIA mole as an ideal candidate for defection. Unbeknownst to Kravchenko, Gorev, and Peck, Valentina plans to use this to free her father. Trebrikov authorized Omega Group to weaponize the findings of Project Endstation and harness the power of the cyclotron and the dark ether. The Endstation facility in Moscow was secured by Omega Group in late August 1983, and after 2 months of study, the cyclotron and the other experimental devices were restored to operational condition by late October. The reactivation of the cyclotron took place on November 1st, 1983, and was overseen by Valentina and Peck. Restarting the cyclotron with an ease that Peck finds somewhat alarming, Valentina was proven correct about Operation Undertaker, and outbreak zones began to occur across the globe. Seeing this, on October 3rd, the Associate Deputy Director of the CIA Department of Science and Technology rapidly drafts a proposal for the cabinet of President Reagan for a new office within the DS&T, with NATO representation specifically for the handling of these outbreaks, known as the Office of Requiem. This director is none other than Eddie Richtofen. He would personally choose Grigory Weaver as the special officer for this office, as well as approving Elizabeth Gray, Oscar Strauss, and Mackenzie Carver for Requiem senior staff.
Die Maschine.
What have you done?
Did you get the package?
We've lost 2 teams since you went dark. Old war footage is the last thing on my mind right now.
Watch it. Watch the tape. Then tell me I'm wrong.
On the basis of intel sent in by Samantha Maxis, Requiem authorized Operation Cerberus. Weaver orders the strike team to investigate the site of Project Endstation in Moscow, Poland on November 13th, 1983. It was here they began to piece together the mystery of the outbreaks happening across the globe. Omega Group had entered this facility and reactivated the cyclotron after all these years, while Requiem were unaware of the motivations at the time. Dr. Valentina had used Omega Group by giving the files on Endstation. She planned to release her father, and according to the steps that she had been given, the first step was restarting this machine. Upon infiltration of the bunker, Strike Team explored the facility and found a dark ether computer, able to send and receive communications with people trapped inside the dark ether. The computer, unbeknownst to Requiem, had been designed by Kazimir Zykov while inside the dark ether, and was a key part in his plan to get someone to release him back to our world. After activating the computer for the first time, Strike Team were contacted by Zykov. He rewarded them for their efforts, and they continued trying to shut down the cyclotron. Once they discovered Dr. Vogel's computer and found his hidden password in his journal, they activated Der Wäschler, a machine capable of restoring brain function to an undead specimen. After trapping the Megaton inside, his ability to think was somewhat restored, but his body remained that of a monster.
What has happened to me? What am I? I am a monster. What did you do to me? I must get out of here. I must escape.
Warning. Subject has broken containment.
Once they managed to calm him down, they learned from him who he was. His name was Orlov, and he had been forced by Valentina and Omega Group to reactivate the cyclotron alongside another man named Medvedev. While Orlov was unsure of this action, Medvedev was excited at the opportunity to advance Soviet supremacy, even at the cost of his own life. As they completed their orders, both men were changed. Orlov split internally over his loyalty to his country, but fear of the consequences of their action became a Megaton, a zombie who was literally split apart. It seems like the Dark Ether was able to replicate multiple versions of it, as it's able to do with all other entities. Medvedev, more confident, became Mayak, a more powerful Megaton overlord creature who could not split and was trapped inside the Dark Ether. With Orlov's help, Strike Team disabled the cyclotron and closed the dimensional anomaly. When the Strike Team escaped the facility, thanks to the helicopter pilot Raptor 1, Orlov sacrificed his life to arm and detonate the nuclear bomb still left over from the atomic experiments in the lab, ensuring the destruction of Project End Station, the cyclotron, and Der Wäschler for good.
Good work, Strike Team. We've closed the breach. But I got a feeling Omega Group is just getting started.